So now I want to talk, and this is really at the heart of what I wanted to talk about today. I want to talk about what is his project, because Imam al-Ghazali has a project. It's the Mashru' al-Ghazali. It's the Ghazalian project. What is that project? First of all, and I use the term liberal arts. I mean, traditionally, this is a Western term. I like it because it's understood in the West, but it really is the same concept as the term that was used in the Muslim world as the ulum al-ala. These are the instrumental arts. They're the arts that are studied to train the mind so that the mind can actually begin to understand reality. And so this is part of his project. And from that, he is really, his whole focus is on reviving the sciences of Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. And then that involved Kalam in Iman, legal theory in Islam, and then the inner path in Ihsan. As a side project, he has the refutation fundamentally of two groups that had huge impact. One of them was the peripatetic philosophers, and the other were the occultists. The peripatetic philosophers, and it's important to remember, when they say that he destroyed philosophy, he was focusing on one school of philosophy, which is the peripatetic school. And he identifies 20 problems, 3 of which he considered to be really kufr, and then 17 of which to lesser and greater degrees. But the methodology of the philosophers he recognized as the best methodology. And this is why he was not opposed to philosophy, but he was opposed to the results of certain schools of philosophy. This is really important to understand. Ibn Khaldun, who wrote considerably against philosophy, in the Muqaddimah says, despite the errors of the philosophers, their methodology is the best methodology. So even Ibn Khaldun admitted this. Imam al-Ghazali is the one that introduces the methodology of the philosophers into kalam, into usul, and arguably into ihsan. So, and for that reason, Ibn Taymiyyah, and in many ways, I think, really motivated from a very pure, he had a very pure intention, I think. But I don't think he recognized what the Imam was trying to do and why he was doing it. The Imam saw the fragmentation of the Ummah. He saw what was happening. And he recognized that there were tools out there that we would need to protect this religion from the onslaught from outside. And it's not to say that the religion itself wasn't enough. It is enough. But the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-hikmatu dallatul mu'min, that wisdom is the lost property of the believer, like a lost riding beast of the believer. Wherever he finds it, wherever he finds it, he is more worthy of it because he will use it for the right reasons. So he really saw that there was great benefit in these tools, in the same way that Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari recognized the same thing in his Kalam project. Ibn Sina, who is much maligned in our community, unfortunately, was an absolute genius that we should be incredibly proud that Allah made him from this ummah, because he is one of the greatest thinkers in human history. And Peter Adamson actually argues that he's probably the single most influential philosopher in European history. Not just and he's an expert, obviously, on Ibn Sina. But Avicenna, his right now the quarantine. This is even though the Prophet ﷺ first articulated the quarantine. Ibn Sina was the one that said it should be for 40 days. He said people should wash their hands with vinegar. Because these diseases are spread by what he called ajsad mu'dhiya, like harmful bodies. Viruses aren't even living things, according to most scientists. There is a debate, but most of them say they're not living things, the viruses. They behave as if they were, but they're actually not. They're just genetic material, just material that have codes in them that corrupt our cells. So the project is a formidable one. So in the liberal arts, he has two fundamental books that are really important. The first one is called Mi'yar al-Ilm. And this is his theoretical book. He wrote it, it's a book of logic, and he wrote it because he felt that the human mind was so fallible that it needed to be trained. So this book is literally the grammar of thought. Now, most people, when they learn a language correctly, and I know there's debates about this, but I actually believe in prescriptive language, so I'm going to use the word correctly. There is incorrect usage of language and correct usage by grammatical terms. A lot of people don't like these terms anymore, but so be it. The grammar of thought is to learn how the mind should work properly when it reasons. That's what the grammar of thought is. So this is called mantiq. Ibn Taymiyyah wrote a book called Radd al Mantiqin. Even though he was a logician, he wrote a book called Refutation of the Logicians. Because he said, and this is a very interesting statement, he said, logic does not benefit stupid people, and it's superfluous for highly intelligent people. That is absolutely true. The problem is most of us fall in the bell curve, in that middle. And this is why the Sahaba didn't need mantiq, because the ones that were fuqaha and were reasoning with their brilliance. And so people that are highly intelligent generally don't need mantiq, but they still will benefit from this training, but they don't need it. So mantiq is to teach people of lesser capacity how to avoid pitfalls like hasty generalization. It's a logical fallacy in what's called material logic, because we do that naturally. I had 3 South Asian taxi drivers in New York. They all cheated me, so every South Asian is a cheat. That's obviously a fallacy. So but that's how the mind works. So that's his first book. And it's a brilliant book. We're actually, alhamdulillah, it's been translated and it's being edited now. And so we're actually, this is going to be part of the Zaytuna curriculum series. So alhamdulillah, that book should be out hopefully within the year. The second book he wrote, which is, I think, one of the most extraordinary books in ethics, and that is Mizan al-Amal, which is, so the Mi'yar al-Ilm is the standard of knowledge. Mizan al-Amal is the scales of action, so that you could weigh every action and determine whether the action was worthwhile or whether it wasn't. So it's a book of virtue ethics. It's a brilliant book. It's heavily influenced by the great polymath and Persian scholastic Raghib al-Isfahani, who wrote one of my favorite books, Ad-Dhari'atu ila Makarim al-Sharia. So now, just in Iman, he wrote his 2 most important books. One is the abridged version, the other is more extensive, are Qawa'id al-Aqa'id and Al-Iqtisad fi al-I'tiqad. So economy in belief, and the other one is the principles of the axioms of creed. Now, so he has his project of introducing the approach using logic in scholastic theology. Now, it's important to remember, the last book that he wrote, probably, is called Iljam al-Awam an Ilm al-Kalam, not allowing common people to study theology. So he was not somebody that really encouraged, but he recognized that a certain group of scholars must learn this because it will enable them to refute the obfuscations and the attacks of the religion by people from outside. So for instance, right now we have all of these philosophers. We have deconstructionists, we have structuralists, we have post-modernists, we have post-colonialists, we have all these different, we have critical race theorists, we have all of these, and then we have also the analytic school. We have people that are working within that school, not just philosophers, theologians like Alvin Plantinga, who I was fortunate enough to be part of the award ceremony, a brilliant scholar working within a certain school of philosophy to defend faith. So he understood that you're always going to have these people out there who use their intellects and sophistry to confuse people. And if you don't have people trained to recognize it, to see it, and to be able to refute it, you're going to get into trouble. And what will happen is you will be left to the argument of blood. That's when you can't defend your religion with intelligence. The people that are zealots, that don't have the intelligence or the training to defend it, will end up defending it through violence. And that's not a defense of religion. Blood is no argument. So that's a really important thing to remember. Now in Islam, he took the abridgments of Imam al-Juwayni. Imam al-Juwayni wrote a famous book called Nihayat al-Matlab fi Dirayat al-Madhab in the Shafi'i fiqh. It's a very important book, but he takes it and he writes a long abridgment of it, a middle abridgment, and a short abridgment. Al-Basit, Al-Wasit, and Al-Wajiz. In fact, one of the Abu Hafs, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz al-Tarablasi, early on, only 10 years after the Imam died, he died. He said, "Shayyid al-madhhab habrun ahsan Allahu khalasa fi basitin wa wasitin wa wajizin wa khulasa." So these are the 4 books in Furu' that Imam al-Ghazali writes. The people who are Shafi'i know this. Imam al-Ghazali is the most important, after Imam al-Juwayni. I mean, obviously the Imam himself, Imam Shafi'i, but all of the later books that come after, including Imam Nawawi, are all dependent on the books of Imam al-Ghazali. So these are foundational books in the madhab. This is in furu', not in usul. So this is in the branches of jurisprudence and not in the legal philosophy. Now in Ihsan, he writes a beautiful short book called Bidayat al-Hidayah, which is really to prepare a person for the spiritual path, to get you to be doing practices on a daily basis. But then he writes his Magisterial Ihya Ulum ad-Din, which is reviving the sciences of the religion. And I'm going to get into that. He then abridges it in Persian in a book called Kimya Sa'ada, The Alchemy of Happiness. And then, and this is the book, inshallah, I'm going to be talking about in a few days. He writes a book called Jawahir al-Quran. He writes it quite late. He's referencing all his other books in it. This book is his theory of the Quran. And what you realize from this book is his entire tradition revolves around the Quran. Everything the Imam was doing is really revolving around the Quran primarily, and then the Sunnah of the Prophet secondarily. So he is a jurist of the first order, and he brings his juristic worldview into the Quranic world and into the prophetic world, but it also is working in his theological perspective and in his spiritual perspective. Now, the third book is very interesting. It's called Kitab al-Arba'in fi Usul ad-Din. Again, it's relatively late. So these 3 are the abridgments. Actually, Jawahir al-Quran is 3 parts, and the third part is the Kitab al-Arba'in. This is the third part. So he said, when he wrote Jawahir al-Quran, he said, if you want, you can use this as a separate book. Because he wrote that, it was later published as a separate book, but it's actually part of the Jawahir al-Quran. So he shows you what the Quran is calling us to. And that is why his entire opus is basically a commentary on the Quran. And the prophetic life, as we know, is a commentary on the Quran. So it all goes back to the Book of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ Sunnah is an explanation of the Quran. Everything is from the Quran. It's all from the Quran. I'm not a Qurani. I'm 100% believe in the Kitab wa Sunnah. But the Sunnah is an explanation of the Quran. And we should understand that.